I believe sometimes as women, as girls, we forget our self-worth. Whether it's boundaries put up around us that prevents us to remember that we are strong, powerful women, or boundaries we put on ourselves that makes us think that we are not strong, that we aren't really worthy. My goal is to change that. My goal is to have you know that you are worthy, that you are capable of making a difference and a change, that you are capable of succeeding and pushing yourself. My podcast, Girls Who Run the World, shares stories of strong, powerful women that are changing the world, that impact their community through their everyday lives. I am so excited to share this podcast with you all, hoping that it makes you realize that you are strong, you are worthy, and you are powerful. Let's do this.
Hello, everyone. Today, I'm interviewing someone so important to the Baltimore area. Not just because she is one of the people working tirelessly behind all that happens with our favorite football team, the Baltimore Ravens, but because she is truly making an impact in her community. My guest today is the amazing Elizabeth Mearman. Elizabeth is the Senior Vice President of Human Resources, as well as the Senior VP of People, Inclusion, and Culture. Elizabeth is dominating her work area and could not be doing more. I'm beyond excited to talk with her today, and thank you, Elizabeth, for joining me. I'm so excited.
Thanks for having me.
I know. I've been waiting to do this one for a long time. I feel like I asked you like 8 months ago. I was
I'm terrible at Facebook Messenger.
That's okay. I don't know.
So
it's okay. Just first start off by telling us like a little bit about yourself, your job.
Sure. I'm Elizabeth Mearman. I am the Senior VP of People, Culture, and Inclusion here for the Ravens. We just rebranded. So we are historically HR.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. And we've taken a different approach in thinking about how we think about our employees and our culture. And we've rebranded to People, Culture, and Inclusion. So in my role, I'm responsible for all of our employees, with the exception of the players. We do pay the players, but managing their culture and inclusion and all of that really doesn't fall under our purview. But we have about 315 full-time employees and about 800 all in, if you count part-time game day, like our cheerleaders and the band and people who run the boards on the game and put on the show. So we have about 800 when you count everybody together.
Yeah. How'd you get to the Ravens? Like, what was that story like?
Oh, it's so interesting because I went to school. I went to UMBC, go Retrievers. And I thought I wanted to be a teacher. And at UMBC, you had to have an academic major and in addition to education. So basically you had a double major. And they made you do placements each semester with the kids. And I did the first one. I'm like, I don't really like this. It was like super young kids. And I'm like, well, I feel like it's probably the wrong placement. And I did another one. And I'm like, I don't like this either. And then I did the third one because you had to do 4 before you did student teaching. And I was like, I don't like this one either. This is totally not for me. So, but I had an academic major in psychology. And if you're from Baltimore, you've probably heard of Aerotech, which is the company that really Steve Shoddy started that made him his millions of dollars that he could ultimately buy this team. I went to work for them and they really took anybody who had a degree and had a good personality and they could teach you how to recruit and they could teach you to do the job. And so that's how I landed in HR and I went to work for them in 1999. And it was a fast growing, high paced, high change. I think I had 5 offices in 5 years because we just kept moving. And the senior VP of HR, who was my boss's boss at the time, he called me into his office one day. And you get that call, he's like, can you come over to my office? And I'm like, crap, what am I working on that he's going to want to know what I'm doing? I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm like, sure, I'll be right over. So I come over and he's got this long office, kind of like I have now. And it's so intimidating. And he turns around and he like floats a piece of paper across the desk. He says, have a seat, and floats this piece of paper across the desk. And it says HR Director, Baltimore Ravens. And it's the job description. And I look at it and I'm like, okay. And he's like, would you be interested in this job? I'm like, is this a joke? Like, what was the right answer to this question? Is it yes? Is it no? I don't know. And I'm like, obviously. So Steve had purchased 49% of the team in 1999. In 2004, he had an option to purchase another 50% of the team, making him the majority owner. And when he did that, he relied on a lot of his financial executives at Aerotech to look at the culture of the business, and they didn't have an HR person. And the SVP of HR at the time was like, you need an HR person. Like, that's just what you need. So they posted a position for a director of HR, and I got it.
And what year was this?
2004.
Okay, so you've been here for a while now.
Yeah, this is my 19th year, but
Oh
20th
my
season. We
goodness.
count in seasons here.
Right.
So 19 years
So
going into my
20th
20th season. Right.
What has it been like to be with the Ravens, through many, challenging years and then a lot of exciting ones? So what's that like?
It's really interesting. We were talking before we
Mhm.
started about how, we are not really doing anything to save people's lives. For example,
Right.
we don't work in a hospital. We're not doctors. We don't do that. But so much of our community is so invested in us,
Mhm.
and people who are going through really hard times, one of their biggest wishes is to stand on that field or to
Yeah.
come to training camp or shake Lamar Jackson's hand. All these kind of magical
Me.
moments these magical moments that you carry with you forever. So in the bad times when we lose, it's really hard because we
Right.
feel like we're letting not only ourselves down, but the whole city and anybody who's invested in us. And in the good times, it's just magical. It's
Right.
just a magical
fun.
experience. Like you were really little when we won the Super Bowl. Let's do it again. But, when we win, this whole town is purple. Every
Yeah.
grocery store you go to, you see somebody with a Raven shirt and you're just united in that
Right.
spirit of winning. And there's really nothing that brings a community together like a tragedy, some sort of horrific mass shooting or a hurricane that
Mm.
does a bunch of destruction and it brings the community together. But nothing brings the community together in a positive way like a winning sports franchise.
Right.
It really does.
Yeah, and I think um I'm a big football fan now and I loved the Ravens, but since going to Alabama, I'm like, gotta love football now. I can't be
Yeah,
like
you totally
I can't be
do.
the odd
It's
man
just
out.
part of who you are.
But I do agree with you that like people can find like football is like the joyful part of their life, and they can sit down in front of the TV or they can sit at the stadium and watch the game and have this moment to themselves where they really are enjoying something that they just love to watch and like
Right.
put down all the worries and their job and a lot of stress things that in these past couple of years that we've had because of COVID and all of the things in
All the
Baltimore.
things.
But because I just think football and the environment here is so like excited. Everyone's just excited for like what's to come. I think
Yeah.
that's a pretty amazing thing that you all have built.
You can feel
Here.
the energy. You
Yeah.
really can. And you can feel the energy when the team is not doing well, the frustration and the disappointment. You can feel the energy in the winning. And the truth is, even if you don't like football, say you're a mom and you're like, I don't like football. My husband's watching that all Sunday afternoon, and that's all they do is watch football. But the thing is, it gathers people together. Your kids
Right.
come home, you make food, they're in your house at the same time doing the same thing, and you remember where you were with those experiences, even if you're not actively
Right.
watching the
Loving
game.
it. Yeah.
It just brings people together.
Yeah.
The community, families, it's a really cool thing.
I love it. Tell us a little bit about the transition from creating, what is it, people, inclusion, and culture, and then tell us a little bit about your role with that here, the Ravens.
Sure. I mean, I would say that the transition was an easy transition to make because our brand of human resources, oftentimes when you think of human resources, you think stuffy, you think the rules, you think, people that you don't want to talk to unless you have to talk to them, that kind of thing. And so our brand, particularly in sports, has been a more edgy style of I would say HR. Obviously people have to follow the rules and that's what we're here to do. But we really make our culture a part of what we do. So when we interview people, it's a very long process. They meet a ton of people. They come to see, so much as we're interviewing them, they're interviewing us. When you come to work, we make sure it's a match. Do you love what you do? Because if you don't love what you do, here you won't be very good at it, for one. And for two, you spend a lot of time here. So our brand of HR has been more strategic business partner rather than HR stuffy police. So
Right.
we sit down and we talk to our leaders and we develop our people and say, let's make sure they're in the right spot. We're making sure we're giving them the tools they need for development. Are they having anything that's happening to them inside of their family that might be harming them or holding them back or any of those kinds of things?
Right.
So the shift from HR to people, culture, and inclusion really wasn't super challenging because the most valuable asset we have in the building are the people.
Right. Are the people.
Right.
And then what do you think in today's workplace, how do you form and what's the importance of this inclusive culture that you guys are building or that you guys have?
Well, it's interesting because it's really a buzzword now. There's a lot of people who are looking for jobs and they want to talk about what your inclusion policy is, where you stand on DEI, where you stand on social justice, and where you stand on social reform and all those kinds of things. So the Ravens have long been a pillar of the community. When the Modells brought the team here, the community was a huge part of them. We've given millions and millions of dollars to all kinds of worthy causes um, throughout the history of the team. And we haven't had a super internal focus on inclusion, although we've had snippets of it. We it was really after 2020 and the George Floyd murder that really, I think, kickstarted America and was like, why haven't we seen this and why haven't we been more active around this? Because it's been happening for generations. And so from that perspective, we really started having some focus groups and listening to our staff and saying, what does it mean? What does it mean to bring your Blackness to work? What does it mean to be open in your LGBTQ life and sharing that kind of thing, and make sure that our culture is supporting all of those kinds of things.
Right.
So just thinking about it in a different way, I think, or thinking about it at all, really.
Another way. Yeah. And I do think it's important, going into high school in a very diverse area, but still like a predominantly white institute, NDP was. And my senior, or was it my junior year? I think it was my senior year. That was the first year ever. Goodness, was it my senior year? I gotta remember. Yes, it was my senior year. Just the first couple months, she ended up leaving, but that we had a DEI representative counselor that people could go to, especially people of color, could have this person that they know they can have this relationship with and talk about their issues that they're encountering, whether it's at school or just in their life in general. And so I see like the word inclusion, DEI come up a lot more in my life after that. And I think you're right, after 2020 with George Floyd, the protests, riots, and then now even more importantly, as like we learn a lot from that, like all the events after that.
Right.
So what do you think are some ways that organizations, or even like what ways that you guys have become more inclusive or have worked with DEI and stuff like that?
It's becoming awareness is one thing.
Right.
And being aware that something needs to be done. If you look around in your culture and it looks pretty homogenous, you have to kind of think about, how did I get this way? You know, because our environment outside of it is not homogenous. We're really diverse, so how did we get this way? And it wasn't purposeful, but it also wasn't purposeful to look for people who look different than us. And the truth is our fans are really diverse. So if you have an all one view, you're not necessarily going to know what fans of a different view are looking for. So some of the things that you can do is really you start thinking about it and you start noticing things. You look around and see what the demographics of your situation are. Do you have single moms? It's not just race. Do you have single moms? Do you have single dads? What do you have that makes up your population of people? And then you start really trying to be more intentional about where you're sourcing your people from for your open positions, but you're also bringing the conversation up in the workplace. You may say, to your moms or to your dads or to your people of color and ask them questions. How does this show up for you in your workplace? And those are conversations that really had never been had before. If you're a mom in sports, particularly, you play sports 7 days a week. This is a 7-day-a-week job from the time training camp opens until we play our final game of the season, which is hopefully at the Super Bowl. We play on Christmas Day this year. We just do. So that is it can be a barrier to entry for people who have families and young children. It can be a barrier to entry for people who have a certain religious belief. So you just have to start talking to people about those kinds of things. And then you can start folding it in. How do we accommodate that? Can we accommodate that? What does that look like? Is it reasonable? Is it unreasonable? Because speaking to your point about sports bringing people together, it really knows no cultural or religious boundaries. It just goes.
Right.
You have to kind of figure out your way around it. So being aware and just opening the conversation is really probably the first thing you can do. And then building some metrics around where you are today and where you hope to be in the future. And you can do climate surveys, you can do analytics and data of your hiring and things like that. And you can look at people, maybe they started here, maybe they're going someplace else. And that's a success story too. It's like maybe there wasn't a full-time job here, but they started as an intern, and 10 years from now, they're the director of marketing for the Browns or something like that.
And I think it is important. Like I like the word that you use, like having awareness, because, personally, I didn't think about and this is the truth, before growing up, like in a predominantly white community,
I didn't see much diversity growing up just in my neighborhood, in the
Mhm.
private school that I went to in Bel Air, and then started to see more as I went to NDP, and now, especially as I've like networked,
Mhm.
grown, gone to college, and just seen more of the world in general. And I think that, being aware was really important when my junior year, senior year, before COVID, George Floyd, and this idea of diversity and Black Lives Matter and all these, organizations, I was never talking about it before. And in my family, we were like,
Right.
we were talking about,
I mean, it's systemic. And someone once described racism as like the air that we breathe.
mhm,
It's so systemic that we aren't aware of it, particularly if we're not a minority. Now,
right,
maybe because you're a woman, it might come up a little bit more
right,
for you, but because we are not people of color, in general, it hasn't come up for us if we're lucky, in our
right.
upbringing. We haven't really had to think about it.
Yeah,
Didn't have to go to school and think about, do people treat me differently because
right,
of the way I look or the way I sound or any of these kinds of things, or the religion I practice or any of those kinds of things, because we're in the dominant group. When
right.
you're in the dominant group, you don't really think about the fact that there may or may not be an elevator, because it doesn't matter, because you can use the stairs,
Exactly.
And so if you're blessed enough to be in a progressive family that is open to talking about it and teaching you about it, at
Right.
least from their perspective, you're at least open to learning. There are plenty of people that are not even open to
Mhm.
learning. Then you go to a different place. The South is historically slower in that
Right.
pace, in a kind way to say that, I
Yeah.
guess, but some of the states in the South
Yeah.
are the ones that have the really conservative laws that, when Roe was overturned, they really
Mhm.
rushed to make some changes that, if you are a more progressive thinker or more a person who really is more liberal in their thoughts, and it's just different. It's
Right.
really different. And so you're going from a little bit more progressive
Yeah.
blue state to
That's
a red
weird.
state. It's
Yeah.
really different. It's
Yeah.
really different.
And it is really interesting because like we never grew up talking about politics. Kenzie, like our parents never brought it up to us, just how we were. And obviously we learned more as we got older and are starting as we are at the voting age, like starting to think about, hey, what are my beliefs? We're just understanding, the history behind it, because it's really hard to have this decision. Like my sister has brought it up like countless times about like whenever she was like voting and all that stuff. And she's like, it's a lot of just learning
It
in this
is.
moment where we
It
have
is.
like this huge decision to make and just like understanding why. Um, but when we were talking about, being the minority group, I actually had a lecture in Alabama where the guy I was giving the lecture was actually deaf,
Mm.
and the whole lecture was in sign language. And a girl was like, "Oh, well, he needs a translator." And I've never thought about this before, but until my professor said it. So my professor has two deaf parents. Both his parents were deaf, and so he just grew up, in that culture of being like kind of shied away from society, like the way people treated him more like his parents. And the professor goes, "No, he doesn't need the translator. You do, because
Mhm.
you need to understand what he's saying. It's not like he is at this level where he's trying to communicate with you and he needs this person with him. It's just that we don't know his language that he's
Right.
speaking, which is sign language."
Right.
And so after my professor said that, I was like, we are the ones that need a translator. We need to understand the idea of what it's like. Try to think. We will never understand someone's fully
Right.
perspective of what they go through. But I think, especially what you're doing here at the Ravens, just like trying to understand where these people are coming from and also celebrate that and allow them to have a voice. You know, these minority groups have a voice more in our community.
Yeah, and their voice is really important because, like I said, they represent our fans. So if we look at it from a homogenous perspective,
Hmm.
we're going to miss a bunch of people. And
Right.
football, there was big uprising when our team knelt in London. I don't know if you're probably a little bit young to kind of really understand the
Hmm.
different dynamics of that, but we played in London for the first time in 2017. We played at 9 a.m. and there was some political upheaval, I think, the night before. And our players, Colin Kaepernick had knelt the season before, and
Oh,
none of our
mhm.
players had done that. There was some upheaval with the president at the time, and they knelt on national TV, 9 a.m. And we have a very, it's probably, the country is split 50-50,
Mhm.
really. So we have a very large population of our fans that are super conservative and felt that was very disrespectful, and were like burning our stuff and then
Mhm.
walking it into our lobby, cutting up their shirts and never vowing never to watch the sport again. And they don't bring politics in and play and, shut up and play and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And then there was probably just as many people that were like, the players have a right to say whatever. There are military people who fought for their right to sit or stand or do whatever they want
Mhm.
to do. So there's this huge upheaval. But if you have people who only think one way, you're going to alienate so many other people. So it is something that brings people together of all types.
Right.
And so that's why the first time that the politics were really brought into it, I think was
Yeah.
such a
It's
big
a hard thing.
it was really hard.
Yeah.
But, you don't it breaks socioeconomic barriers, it
Mhm.
breaks race and gender barriers, it breaks, male, female. There are tons of female fans, so it really is something that brings people together. And so you have to really walk the fine line of like
Right.
what they do and what they say, but also make sure that the people who are working here and are serving our fans have 2 million followers on Facebook.
Right.
2 million people. 2 million people are not at M&T Bank Stadium on Sunday. It doesn't
Yeah.
fit 2 million people. So, who are those 2 million people and how do we reach them and how do we connect with
Right.
them? And we have a Black quarterback, which is super inspirational for, Black children
Yeah.
across America and across the world. It's like, I can be that. Representation matters. And
Right.
how do we reach them? And what do we do? What do we put on our social channels? What do we put on our website? What do we put on our podcasts and on our TV channels and on our boards? And how
Right.
do we reach those kids and those kinds of things? And you need a diverse group of people thinking about that in order to create
Right.
content and deliver what it is that's going to reach all different kinds of fans.
Right. And I think that's a lot of things that companies are doing now. Company that I love, Aerie, was like
Yeah.
one of the first, American Eagle,
Yep.
Aerie,
Yep.
was like one of the first companies, well, that I saw like as a girl, as a woman, like in the, shopping,
Yeah.
looking at magazines and online that had different race, different sized
Yeah.
women in their like wearing their clothes. Now it's like Old Navy has taken the next
Yep.
step and Gap and that whole collection of brands. And you can like pick which size model you want to see the
Yep.
clothing on
Yep.
instead of like some
Yep.
tall, skinny, which she's gorgeous too. People want to see that,
Right.
but people also want to see like their size if they're not
Right.
that size.
Right.
And so I think, with race, but also with like I said, plus size, all different size women. And I think it's just companies are now taking a step to think, oh, how can we allow people to see themselves? Like you
Yes.
said, like how
100%.
can I look at this and my mom and my sister and my grandmother look at these clothing, or that's just an example I'm giving,
Right.
and see ourselves or TV shows,
Totally.
and especially in Apple TV, now we see, I think I was just watching like Ted Lasso the other day,
Mhm.
and I think TV shows have just changed in the way that we see a more diverse culture, even in
Mhm.
TV shows. So it is something interesting to like be growing up at this time to see what it was when I was a little kid and now watching TV shows now
Yeah,
and
and if you
seeing.
think about it, sports is entertainment. We're in the entertainment business. So entertainment, retail, they're all trying to make a connection with somebody to buy their stuff.
Right.
I mean, candidly, that's what we're trying to do. We want to fill that stadium. We do not want an empty seat on any day that we are
Yeah.
playing in that stadium. So we need to make it our business to connect with people who are invested in us and what's our connection and is it
Right.
our connection? And it's not a homogenous connection because it's not a homogenous group of people that are in there. The same thing with Aerie, the same thing with Old Navy. They're not just selling to 5'9",
Yeah.
120-pound women. More often than not, they're not selling to those people. And
Yeah.
how do they make that connection? And how do they get you to buy in to be brand loyal? And that's
Right.
really what we're trying to do. We want those 2 million people to be brand loyal to the Ravens.
Right.
And we want you to be a part of our community. Ideally, you buy a ticket and you come to the game,
Yeah.
or you buy some gear, you support us in some sort of
Right.
way. You raise your kids to support us, and
Right.
so we just build that community. If you look at, really long legacy teams like the Steelers, I don't know, you travel a little bit. Everywhere I've ever been in my entire life, I've seen somebody in a Steelers shirt. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been in the British Virgin Islands, I've been in California, I've been in New York. I'm like, these people are everywhere. Like,
Yeah.
that's our goal. We want to be everywhere. And so they're really good at it. But the same
Right.
thing with any kind of retail or
Right.
restaurant, how
Yeah.
do we connect with you so that you pick us all the time?
Exactly. Switching topics a little bit. Employee engagement is a really big thing, especially in companies today. So how do you think, or what are some ways that you're, in getting your employees engaged with your company and also the community?
Sure. That's a great question. I think by the nature of what we do, being engaged is a qualification of the job. You
Right.
really can't be disengaged and be successful at your job. 99.9% of our jobs have some sort of involvement with the football team
Hmm.
and the game experience. Most of our employees have a game day job that they're working the entire time, and they are engaging with our fans. They're engaging with each other. They're engaging with the players, our athletic trainers, our equipment staff, our
Hmm.
coaches, and our scouts. I mean, they have such a connection to the team that in order for the on field performance, everybody else is for the off field performance.
Hmm.
What's going on the boards? What are we serving in the stands? How cold is it? How hot
Yeah.
is it? Is it raining? What are we going to do? Those kinds of things. Like, how do we get people in and out safely?
Right.
How do we have the best game day experience possible? So that is just 100% engagement all the time.
Yeah.
So from the actual employee level is we talk about it. We ask them, what do you think? How do you feel? Like, we're not looking. I get emails all the time that say, I just love the Ravens so much. I'll do anything. I'll sweep the floors. I'll wash the clothes. I'll do anything. And so I'm like, that's great. We love that fan loyalty and that fandom. That's wonderful. Be a
Yeah.
fan. We love that. Buy a ticket, come to the game, come to an event. But when it comes to working, I want you to know what you want to do, and I want you to be
Right.
really good at it. I want you to say, I'm really passionate about guest experience. And if you think about Disney as somebody being
Yeah.
very passionate about guest experience, they want people who are really passionate about the people walking through the door having a really good time. And they think about it, and we ask their opinion, and they're professionals on it, and they talk about it. And we are engaged with them and their intellectual content that they
Right.
bring and how we execute it. So from an engagement standpoint, we have a lot of meetings. We ask a lot of questions. We ask our employees to pour their heart and soul into it,
Right.
and we listen to them. Tell us about your
Yeah.
experience. What do you think? Again, it goes back to the diversity. If you have diverse thought, it's like, okay, well, maybe a fan would like this or that,
Right.
Um, so that's a little bit about engagement. And then we really just have a culture where we used to be remote when it was kind of unheard of with COVID. We had to go
Yeah.
remote, and we've slowly brought people back because what we do is an in-person thing. So
Right.
to have people working remote 100% of the time when what we're really asking for is to fill that stadium, and you can't practice remote, you can't
Right.
train remote, you can't have fans come remotely. We want in person. So that really does help us with engagement because we have people here all the
Right.
time, and you talk to each other, you see each other in the hallway, you eat lunch together, you spend a lot of time together. So that helps.
I know. I love like Kenzie and I. It's such a long story. We won't tell you guys all of it. But anyway, we need our passports. Elizabeth here helped us. And whenever we came in that day, first off, Kenzie and I were like feeling like we were the best people. We're like telling all our friends, we're like, we're going to the Ravens Castle, they call it. It was like this whole thing. But the feeling of coming in and even into that cafeteria, even though we just like walked like 50 feet into the cafeteria, the people that helped us, but seeing them interact with one another, with each other was like amazing. Like people were like, do they call you EJ?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so they were saying EJ.
Yeah.
I'm like, where's the J? I don't know.
It was,
But-
yeah, I got married. It's Mearman.
Oh,
It
oh,
was
oh.
Jackson before, so they called me EJ, which I never really liked, but they did.
Well,
it.
that's what they were calling you. I
Yeah.
was like, I don't understand. That must be her. But just to my point is like walking into like a place where you feel like everybody knows each other. Like
Yeah.
everybody is such, and I only have been here once, but like feeling that connection of people. There was like an ice cream truck outside.
Yeah.
This is the second time.
Yeah.
But just like seeing people engage with one another, seeing people engage was like amazing for me because
Yeah.
I didn't see the behind the scenes of the Ravens
Yeah.
ever in my life, and I
Yeah.
haven't even seen it all. But I just saw
Yeah.
like part of this community has such a big love for, this game, but also like what they're sharing with and bringing to people.
Yeah.
So that was really something that Kenzie and I enjoyed seeing and being a part of for just like a couple minutes.
It's super cool, and we ask a lot of our employees because they give a lot to what it is that they do, and they're super talented. You can see the output on game day. You can see the output on our social channels. You can see
Right.
the output on LinkedIn and our internet and all that kind of stuff. But the inside, it's a pretty small,
Mhm.
close-knit group of people who make really big, flashy things happen. I mean, if you look around in this podcast studio, the artwork and
Right.
just the coloring, that all comes from in-house, and the color on the walls and that kind of thing. It all comes in-house. And so you really need people to be together and meld together and work together. and that creates a sense of feeling of family. And it
Mhm.
creates, and we're all united. We all want to win. Like
Right.
most
It
of
really
the
does.
people
Yeah.
are these type A kind of competitive people, which, and it's like they might get in squabbles with each other, but don't you, it's like family.
Yeah.
I might fight with my sister, but don't you dare say a bad thing about my
Yeah.
sister. We're in it together. And so when you do win, you win together. And when you lose together, and you take it really hard.
Right.
The football team takes it really hard. So does the marketing team. The playoff run and the stuff that we put together for like kickoff week to get the city excited, and the
Yeah.
stuff that team puts together, the social team and the marketing teams for the playoffs is just so intense, and it's so
Yeah.
fun, and it's crushing when you lose. It's crushing because you're
For
like,
everyone.
for everybody. And then you literally see on Mondays and Tuesdays, the players come in and they're wearing ice taped on their shoulders
Yeah.
and their knees, and how actual physically painful the game is for them.
Right.
And then you see them again the next Sunday and they're out there like playing as hard as they
Crazy.
can. So that really creates a level of engagement that a lot of other companies just
Right.
don't naturally have.
Don't actually have. Yeah. And so as a woman, now going on to like being a woman in a male dominated industry. So
Yeah.
as a woman in a traditionally male dominated industry, what has it been like in the past, as I guess in your whole life being in this industry?
It's interesting. I never really thought of it as being a woman necessarily when I first came in. I'm
Uh-huh.
a little bit naive to it. It's a
Yeah.
little bit like you were talking about. I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I know it's a sport played by men. And there were some women on the business side, not many on the football side
Mhm.
when I first started. I don't think any, they were, if they were in like administrative
Right.
roles. They really weren't in like leadership roles.
Yeah.
And that's changed over the last 20 years a lot. We have women in leadership roles. There's still a long way to go,
Right.
to be honest. But I never really thought of myself, oh, I'm a woman. But I have oftentimes been the only woman in a room
Right.
full of
Yeah.
men making a decision. But I feel like I've been able to hold my own. But again,
Great.
bringing awareness to it and being like, okay, maybe I need to think about it differently because I am a woman. And there are some things that I'm like almost conditioned myself to be
Right.
like, okay, well, that's okay. But I'm like, wait a minute, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Like that's not really the way we should be thinking about things. It's not really the way. Maternity leave is a good example.
Yeah.
Like in this country, maternity leave is really pretty crappy. It just is. And so I'm like, well, wait a minute. We have the power to change that. Why do we have to accept the crap?
Right.
And why do
Yeah.
we have to accept that someone can only get 6 weeks at 60% of their pay? And I'm like, when they work so hard all year, so we changed it. And
Yeah.
we have 13 weeks at 100%, which
Amazing.
is,
Yeah.
and you go on maternity leave and we turn off your access. Go take care of your new baby,
Right.
whoever it is. And we have parental leave for the dads. And so there are things that like institutionally that have
Right.
been built into us as women that we learn to accept. But then it's again bringing awareness to it and being like, wait a minute, do we have to do that? Let's see if we can
Right.
think about it differently. There's still some hills that we have to climb in terms
Yeah.
of women having um, even access. If you think about it on the coaching side, if you want to get into football coaching or football scouting, oftentimes you played the game.
Right.
Men just don't play the game at the same level that women have the ability
Yeah.
to do here today. That doesn't mean
I
women
agree.
can't be good scouts. It doesn't mean that women can't be good coaches. But to get to those elite levels, you've usually been doing it your whole
Right.
life. And that's kind of an institutional, traditional,
Yeah.
like you played and then you were like a graduate assistant somewhere, something like that. So for women to break down those barriers, we still have a long way to go. But it's coming.
Yeah.
The NFL has put some requirements. You have to have, when I started, there was no female locker room. There was no, so if you had there wasn't a female official. There wasn't a female coach. And if there was no place for her to shower and change. You think about
Oh, right.
the
Yeah.
coaches, oftentimes they wear different clothes on the bus or
Yeah.
to the game, and then they change. Sometimes they shower, sometimes they don't. If it's freezing cold, they layer up. There weren't sideline gear. There
Right.
wasn't sideline gear for women, and now there is.
Yeah.
They would alter the men's clothes for the few women that were there.
Yeah.
So there's been some great strides in that, which is really good. We just need more women to choose
Right.
this sport as a
Right.
career. It's like, this is
And
what
it
I
all
really
goes
wanna
back
do.
to like understanding thinking, because there was I can't remember what the company is named, but it was an engineering company and they would have a uniform. Obviously, they put on like these jumpsuits. And I think the lady's name who created it was Jamie Glass. And she was the first woman that joined the company. It was like, we need women outfits, like
Yeah.
women fit jumpsuits, because all these women that were in this engineering company and building, like one of my greatest friends, Ella Howard at school, she is in the engineering field. And I didn't think about it much until she was into it, because I always just thought male dominated industry, and now more women are getting involved with engineering. But what they wear to
Right.
their uniform.
Right.
And like just
Right.
thinking about to little things like that, like we need to have, this fit a woman better
Right.
than it would
Right.
fit huge like a man,
Right.
So
Right.
I think it all comes down to just like revolving around like what each aspect of the
Yeah.
job looks like. And then also, like you said, you've been the only woman at the table, but also like you said, you've done a great job of like, or I'm just gonna speak, I want to speak for you, but of like holding your own, like speaking up for yourself. Do you think?
I think
For the most
so.
part?
And you win some and you lose some.
Yeah.
Where me and my team have the power to make changes, we do. Our former president, and who was with the team for 18 years, was very empowering, and he
Huh.
listened, and he, okay, yeah, let's do that. And our current president is really the same way. He's a bit, I like to see, he's an envelope pusher.
Yeah.
He challenges us, think about things differently. I'm like, okay. And sometimes we win and sometimes
Right.
we lose. Sometimes it's like, okay, not right now. And sometimes like, yes, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So, but the ability, I mean, he and I were just going on a debate about this hire just yesterday. And I'm like, and another thing. And he's like, I hear you. And I'm like, but one more thing. I'm going to go down fighting on this. And he still might not
Yeah.
land where I land, but at least there's a voice. And I can say, okay, I understand where you're coming from. You understand where I'm coming from. You may not choose what I want you to choose, and that stinks, but we're still on the same page.
Right.
And we've made some inroads to think about it differently.
Right.
So that's what I mean by holding my own. I
Yeah.
never felt like ever held back simply because I'm a woman, or that my voice doesn't
Heard.
count as loudly.
Yeah.
And there's 2 women on the executive team now, and both of us, I think, have been here for a long time, and we've built up a reputation of being fair and will listen, but we also just don't go quietly into
Right.
the night,
I think that's part of the great community that the Ravens have built, because there are many workplaces that maybe women feel silenced, or they don't feel like they necessarily have a chair at that table
For
or a
sure.
place to speak,
For sure.
or they feel like shunned. So I think it is all part of like the culture that, you all have built here. Not
It
just the
is.
president, but like everyone in general.
It is, and it's interesting. Gender dynamics are really wonky. Like, there's nothing I can ever do to put myself in a man's shoes, and
Right.
vice versa. There just really isn't. Our bodies are different. Our
Yeah.
physical capabilities are oftentimes different. There will be men who would be uncomfortable with me being in the locker room.
Yeah.
And that is unique to a men's locker room, because in a female locker room, like in the WNBA or, a women's soccer team, men have been in there their whole careers.
Right.
They've just been used to it. But
Right.
in male sports, that hasn't really been the case.
Yeah.
That's changed over the years. It's like, okay, well, there are female reporters in there. There are athletic trainers. There are doctors. There are public relations professionals and those kind of people who have a job to do, and they're in that same locker room. And there have been some conservative men that are like, no, I don't want them in that space because it's a vulnerable space for me. So we had to come up with
Right. With
accommodations
ways.
to meet that, because we're not all the same gender. So there are some things that we've really had to reconsider. It's like, right, if I'm a woman and I'm taking a shower after a game and I don't really want the male PR intern to see me
Yeah.
undressed, that's probably fair,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's fair the other way. So how do we move around that? Because that
Right.
PR intern has a job to do,
Yeah.
and how do we get both needs met?
And which have like sadly a lot of things have become more political in our community, but also in a great way, and where we can like understand, topics, especially like equality for women, and just like giving women more of a voice,
Right. Right.
especially with like the podcast. That I often get questions of like, why don't you have your dad on? I would love to, but why don't you have your dad on? Or a lot of people will ask me, here's a man that you should have on. As much as I see a lot, like I see my dad as someone that is like dominating, his life, and like just really living his best life, and
Yeah.
learning a lot, and sharing a lot with Mackenzie and I and my mom, and just having this amazing life with my parents. I think that it's important to give women a space where they, can just hear from two women talking,
Right.
or multiple women talking. And so I think that it's just important for, especially the area that you've built here, or you all have built here at the Ravens, just make everyone feel like they have a place.
Yeah, you are, and that's really hard to do. To your point, it's all about learning, like
Yeah.
how we're raised. The nature versus nurture kind of argument. It goes
Mhm.
back to like, are you born this way? Are you nurtured this way? Are
Right.
you developed differently? There's tons of studies and research that will say boys are definitely raised differently than girls, and
Yeah.
some of that they carry that with them. They're taught not to show their emotions or accept that being
Mhm.
vulnerable and all those kinds of things is sort of a conditioning in a patriarchal
Yeah.
society that we're in. And so, like, as a parent, I try to do different with my
Yeah.
son. I'm like,
He's so
okay."
cute though. He's so cute.
I'm like, buddy, if you need a hug, it's okay. Like, to try to balance that out a little bit. But and be accepting of whatever. We
Yeah.
can always build a bigger table.
Right.
That's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
there's this whole sense of, if I change how I think or
Yeah.
I open up, you're taking something away from me. And that's not really the case at all. We can just build a bigger table.
Did you post that the other day or something?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like-
I just totally stole that from you. I was going to say it.
I'm like, it's
I
not
heard
a
that somewhere. I'm
competition.
like, it was you.
Yeah, it's not a competition. Like, I don't have to squelch somebody
agree.
else
Yeah.
in order to be important, whatever that means. It's particularly for women, like two women talking and like empowering each other and letting you know we're not in competition. I'm
Yeah.
gonna help you and you help me.
Mhm.
We don't have to compete against each other. We could both be successful.
Right.
And let me help you do that. And the same thing with anybody who's in this gender fluid space. I don't care how you are. Let me figure out how I can help you and how I can support
Yeah.
you and what you can bring here to this culture, and we'll figure out something. And there's
Right.
going to be new territory. Okay, I get it that you might be a bigger swimmer because you're a transgender woman. Let's figure it out. There
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a space for hate that says we're
Right.
never going to do that. And
whether,
that's really what we're fighting
right. And I think
against.
it's whether if they create, like I do think that maybe like even if they have women, men, and people that are non-binary, 3 different.
Right.
Like if we really, I do think I'm trying to like stay away from the conflict. It really is so much at this age, but
Yeah.
even if we create a new, what's it called?
A new category.
Category for
Right.
people. Like when I ran, St. Michael's half, I just PR'd in St. Michael's half
Nice.
marathon.
Congratulations.
I think it was really fun. Very humid though. It was like, and Dad wasn't running with me this time. It's the first half marathon he didn't run with me because I was like, "It's your turn. Go do PR," and he definitely did because he's been working on speed apparently since I've been gone. And so I won in my age group. I was like 3rd in my age group, and there was a different category now for people that are non-binary
Just
or
like to think,
transgender or whatever the term
wherever
is.
you want to be, like, you think we just
Yeah.
think about it. It's really, there is an immediate sort of defense mechanism when you think about the word inclusion
Right.
oftentimes, because you think if I include you that I'm going to get something less,
Right.
or particularly if you're in the dominant group, you're like, wait a minute, what does
Yeah.
that mean? Does that mean we're not hiring white people now? Does that mean we're not doing things the way we've always done them because I'm super
Right.
comfortable with that? And so the bigger focus is, let's just talk about it. Let's
Yeah.
think about it. Let's be creative. What always was may not always be. And there may be a grieving process for that for some people who have to come to terms with whatever it is, but we need that in order to progress. We are not the same society we were in the 1900s. Guess what? We have electricity now,
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
we have things
Yeah.
to make us go bigger, faster, stronger. So we're constantly evolving, and change is hard for people, and people, depending on how you were raised, and your religious beliefs, there's a bunch of stuff around that. But really being progressive around your open-mindedness, you may
Right.
still say, that's not for me,
Right.
but that's okay for you, and I'm going to support it.
Yeah.
That's a completely different conversation than judging someone for
Exactly.
how they look, how they dress, who they love, what religion they are, any of those kinds of things. Is like, really just be a contributing member to
Yeah.
society, and kindness and goodness. That's what matters at the
Yeah.
end of the day.
Like in some situations and debates and stuff like that, where I might not know my opinion entirely, like what my religious beliefs are and stuff like that. And if I say, you know what, I don't truly believe in this, or I don't believe that this should be a thing, especially like with what you just said, like I think they should create a new league and we could have 3. We could just think about it differently, but I do think that it's important to be open-minded, like you said.
Right.
I think the people that are closed-minded, or is that the word, closed-minded?
Yeah.
Or just like off of saying, no, that's not for me entirely, or just being like, hey, I'm going to listen to it. And my
Right.
dad was saying the other day, we were talking, and he was like, the most important thing you can do is just listen and try to understand from some point of how this could maybe affect your belief or change it,
Right.
or it's
Right.
something you haven't thought about
Or
before.
give you empathy
Yeah.
or show some vulnerability or understanding. And it is really different. I remember this is a funny story. So I started in Aerotech in 1999. I started as an HR assistant, and the HR director at the time was British, and she was this cool, like quirky
Yeah.
lady, and she would say, "Oh, darling," she talked to us in her British accent. She was super smart.
Yeah.
And there was another girl on my team, and it was the two of us, and she was dedicated to a little bit of the recruiting side, and
Yeah.
I was sort of the catch-all side. And she's a person of color. She's a Black woman. Still friends with her to this day, and she had braids in her hair. And so Friday we went home and we said bye, have a nice weekend. And then our cubes were we had walls, so our faces were kind of together, but we couldn't see each other. So
Right.
Monday I came in and I go bebopping around the corner to say good morning to her, and her hair is super short. And I was like, "Oh my God, you cut your hair!" And she's like, "No, dummy, I took out my braids." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. So let's talk about that. What is that?" I
Yeah.
had no idea.
I have
Like
no
I
idea.
had no
Yeah.
idea. I thought she literally had long braids because much
Yeah.
like you, I grew up in a predominantly white community. I didn't have any Black friends, and I'm like, "All right, so we can talk about it." I'm like, "Do you use hairspray? Like what?" And she's like, I learned all
Right.
about her hair, and like she was graciously like shared that with me, because it's I didn't know, and she probably knew a lot more about white hair than she ever
Right.
really wanted to because that's the dominant culture. But like
Right.
just being open to being understanding and have friends that are different than you. And you don't really have that until you explore the world outside. I mean, your
Exactly.
parents' job is to kind of keep you in a small bubble and
Yeah.
shelter you and get you to the place where you can learn about who you want to
Yeah.
be. But you don't really know that until you get out of that. And it
Right.
was just a really cool experience. And it was for me one of the first times I was like, whoa. And we talked a lot about her growing up and how she was raised versus
Mhm.
how I was raised and the kinds of things that Black parents do to protect Black children. She's like, the
Right.
police come to your school and they're really great friends. And my parents are like, be very careful. Put your hands on the steering wheel when you
Yeah.
stop. Be very respectful because I want you to come home safe. Versus our parents were like, the police are going to bring you home safe.
Right.
It's just a completely different way that they were
Yeah.
raised and the way they view the world. And I was like, wow, we weren't really raised in the same country,
No, yeah.
and
And it is really wild. And I still
Yeah.
haven't had that full, like, and I can say that, like, sadly, but also I want to learn more.
yeah,
And, like, I'm still in an area where, I've revolved myself I'm around the same type of people
Yep.
as me. And even though it's changed drastically
Right.
since I was a younger kid, I think it is still very, like, it's going to be interesting to learn about somebody
Yeah.
else. And who was it? One of my friends or someone I knew somehow, her best friend lived in, I don't know, a totally different country, grew up totally I'm gonna butcher the story, but they got to learn so much about each other. And that's
Yeah.
just an example like you just gave. And it's like actually like when Kenzie and we want to go study abroad. I want to learn
Yeah.
other people's culture, and that's something I think is really important.
It's really sad in this country because of really systemic racism and redlining. Like there aren't mixed communities. Like,
Uh-huh. Right.
it's all basically the same people. And even if that's the same case sometimes with historically with immigrants, like
Mhm.
all of the Italian people lived together
Yeah.
because they had a like-minded culture. All the Irish people lived together and when they immigrated. But as the country grew and laws were put into place, like segregation really impacted the way our communities are in this country.
Right.
Like schools are really
Even in
not
Maryland.
they're right.
Yeah.
They're really not diverse, unless you go
Yeah.
down to PG County,
Yeah.
where it is. But, if you live in suburbia, it's predominantly
Yeah.
white. Um,
I have a couple last questions. I know
Okay.
we've been talking. I'm like talking in a year off, but what advice would you give to women who aspire, to have these big leadership roles in these industries, huge industries?
I think my advice to anybody is always be true to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Find something you're passionate in, something you're good at, something you like doing, and bring that to the table.
Right.
And be really good at it. Be really good at your craft. Be really good at what you do and how you do it, and be passionate about it. And never stop learning. So
Mm.
even if you're good at it at that moment, there's something else to learn. Never
Right.
stop learning. Never stop being open. because relationships get you really, really far in the world. Coming from the place that I am there, we've done all kinds of the spectrum of employees who've been like really, really good at their job or really, really bad at the job. And the ones who are really bad at their job but have great relationships still do better than the people who are really good at their jobs and don't have relationships. So be really good at what you do, but also don't underestimate the power of a relationship and a connection. People want to feel connected. They want to feel like you care. They want to feel like you have their back. There are some women that feel like, that have been in a position where I have to be really good and bold and put on this face, and I don't want to be vulnerable, and I don't want to, I'm in competition with everybody else. And I just don't, for me, that would not be my advice to anyone. My advice is like, build a bridge, build a bigger table, be good at what you do, and build allies wherever you go. I think that would serve you so much better, and always be willing to learn.
It's such an important and exciting thing to do. When we were in high school, but I also had parents, like everyone grows up differently, but I also had parents that were very, connected. My dad and mom both had connections that they knew people from that I've learned, about, but seeing them like network themselves their entire lives.
Yeah.
Like it is so exciting for me to like, especially with the podcast, like I just love meeting new people. And whether it's I learn someone from a guest or someone recommends somebody, or a lot of the time all the people that I've picked or have chosen or asked to come on have been someone that I've followed for a while and just have like, was like, oh, this would be really interesting. Or someone that I have recently just like kind of fallen in love with what they've posted. Like you, I was like, I follow on Facebook. I'm going to Facebook message. It was probably the worst way to communicate
But
ever.
it's great.
I don't even know how to work it. I was like, it was awful.
Well, the problem with it is, and I'll tell you, is like if you post in your story and people like it, the messages just get so filled up. And like mine's got like 300 messages. And I'm like, I don't possibly have time.
No.
And most of them are just like liking something that I like. They're not actually saying anything of substance. So I'm like, I ignore it because I'm like, it's overwhelming.
I only use it to text Alyssa Mearman.
Yeah, I really do. Yeah.
I don't know anyone else on it. We'll have to figure out a new way. But okay, last questions that I ask all of my guests is second to last. Do you like to read? And if so, like what is your favorite book?
Ooh, I do like to read. I read way less now because I have 2 young kids, and if I read a chapter, I fall asleep. So I listen to a lot of podcasts because I have a long commute. But I do like to read, and I usually like to read people's stories. So,
that's how I am.
I like books, and sometimes for vacation, I like to read a book that will make me escape. I don't really like scary things or sad things, so I like to read a book that will make me escape. But on my most recent vacation, I read Gabrielle Union's books, and they were so interesting.
Yeah.
And she's so cool. I'm like, totally have a glass of wine with her. As my most recent read, but I like historical fiction too.
Okay.
There's a local author, Erica Roebuck. Shout out to her if you like historical fiction. She writes a lot about powerful women figures in history. So there is an element of fiction to the book, but it is really historical. She does research. Sisters of the Night and Fog is a really good one. She wrote about one of Ernest Hemingway's wives. So good stuff like that.
Yeah.
So a little bit of truth. And then if I'm really like just trying to take a break, I will just read something that is just like a Kristen Hanna book or something like Firefly Lane or something like that for like a beach read, but which is also super sad, but something like that.
So do you have a favorite, do you have a favorite book? Like
favorite book? Probably one that I really stands out for my book club, or probably 2, which is Memoirs of a Geisha.
Okay.
And the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver were really good books for me. That are probably my ultimate favorite like summer read is Summer Sisters by Judy Blume. I give it to everybody.
I think I've seen that a lot. Like,
it's a little smutty, but it's about these 2 girls who grew up as friends, and it's just really, it's like a beach. It's a good beach read.
Yeah, I love a story too. But I've been listening more, and I think I am more of a listener. Like, I've been listening to a book whenever I'm by myself driving.
Yeah.
I'm listening to Girl Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis.
Yep.
And I have really liked it. But I've realized, like, it's easier for me just to put it on and listen. And I actually, I think it is her narrating.
I think she does narrate her.
Yeah,
I've not listened or read that, but that's on my list. But I find listening sometimes my mind drifts, and then I have to, like, back it up. And I'm like, So I have
to do it when I'm like connected.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to listen to this. I feel good. I need to learn? Like, I'm not a big reader, so this is why I asked the questions, because I really want
It
to
is a good question.
get
I
into it.
also have Michelle Obama's new book
Oh
on
yeah,
my nightstand, and I
what's it
have
called? Is it?
the light we see in us, the
Yeah.
light in us, something like that. Becoming was the first one, and it's the light we carry. I
Oh yeah,
think is it. I have that, and I also
I think
have
Dad read that.
Harry's Spare on my
Oh yeah,
nightstand too.
that should be interesting. Ooh. But so finally, what would you tell the girl who is struggling to know her self-worth or find confidence?
Hang in there. Hang in there. You know, every single woman, and I would say man too, because, to break this patriarchy, all of us struggle with that.
Right.
Every single person, every single woman has to come to terms with her body, what it can and can't do, how you fuel it, how you don't fuel it, what's your natural color of your hair. Is it curly? Is it straight?
Yeah.
Do you get highlights? Do you wear makeup? Whatever it is. And so that is a rite of passage that every single human has to go through. You have to figure out how to love yourself for who you are. And the only way to get there is through. Can't
Yeah.
go around. There's no shortcut. But surround yourself with good people,
Yeah.
build a good connection of network of people. And if people that are around you, you don't feel good when you're around them. If it
Yeah.
doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. If they
Yeah.
don't make you feel good about yourself, if they make you doubt yourself, if they don't build you up, they don't cheer you on, they may not tell you everything you want to hear,
Yeah.
because inside you may say, knowing the answer and you're still not making the choice
Yeah.
that you should make. But so they may have tough conversations with you, but tough conversations out of love versus tough conversation out of envy or jealousy is a really different thing.
Right.
And, lean into those feelings of that and kind of understand where that's coming from and push through. And if you don't have the right circle, find a different circle. Because believe me when I tell you, there are women out there that will
Yeah.
champion you. There are women out there and there are men out there that will support you.
Yeah.
But finding your own inner self-confidence is something that every single person on the planet has to do. It's
Right.
not unique to you. And I don't care how confident that person looks next to you, they had to go through it too.
Right.
Um,
It's great.
and
I think that's great advice. I think real quick before we wrap up,
yeah.
the other day, this just connects to amazing what you just said. I snuck Instagram from my parents growing up. Like I was like 6 or 7. Like
Oh
guys,
my
I was
gosh.
young, 7, I think. It was on my iPad because mom would be logged in and I'd be like, yeah, no. We were going to, it was like Maddie Patty. I'm not gonna say it, but whatever. It's it's my Instagram now. I've changed the thing. I've archived all the posts. But the past month, I've been like past year really when I've started this, and I've just have had a lot of confidence in myself, but also in the community that I've built around myself and, the community that I'm in with women. We've gone through the archive posts and I haven't shown many friends, but the other day I did. And when I tell you like, okay, it's probably 7 or 8. Yeah. And then it gets bad when I'm like 9 and 10. The things I'm posting, like that little girl had no care in the world. Like I did not care about makeup. I did not care about like fitting in or any of this. I posted a video of me like eating cereal. I was like, morning. And it really is like one day we'll have to go through it. But I think it is just knowing, and you find it at the right time. And I
Yeah.
think that it is really tough. And after that, like middle school was tough. High school was a little tough. But it is all about who you surround yourselves with.
It is. And it's funny because I have a 4.5-year-old daughter. And if we could all have the confidence of a 4.5-year-old or a 5-year-old, and we could carry that with us forever. Like if I had a wish for the world, that would be it.
Yeah.
Because when you're that age, you just don't care.
You don't at
she
all.
walks around naked all the time.
Yeah.
And like she loves her body and she thinks she can do anything. And not in an arrogant way.
Yeah.
She just firmly believes in herself. And somewhere along the way that gets lost.
Right.
And social media really truly is to blame a lot of times for
Yeah.
girls in particular. There's a lot of research that says, young women and the algorithm that feeds body image and
Right.
self-confidence is really deteriorating over social media. So I'm gonna have to face that of when I give it
Yeah,
to
don't let her sneak Instagram.
Don't let her sneak it.
No, it was different back then.
It
Though.
was
like
different.
mom quotes and like
it was different.
It was a little bit like
But
Pinterest.
that ability to believe in yourself and have faith that it will be okay and that you can do hard things and you can get through it, and that every single other person is going through the same thing, no matter what they put out to the
Right.
world. Because every single person has to take that same journey that
Right.
you and I have to take, and it wanes. You may be high now and you may get your mid-20s and be like, well, I think it happens all the time. I thought I was going to be married. I thought I was going to be able to buy a house. I thought I was not going to have any school loans, and I have a job I don't like, and it dips. And then you have to kind of dig back into yourself and say, all right, where's my village?
Right.
What do I have? And am I looking at really the reality of life, or am I looking at the social media reality of life where people are putting their highlight reel out there? And it's like, so you, and every 25-year-old is going through this. Every new mom is going through this. Every new divorcee is going through this. Everyone who starts a new job has anxiety or an imposter syndrome. And like, so you just sort of have to kind of remind yourself that like, all right, I'm confident in my skills. I know I can do it. And everyone else feels the same way.
Right. And people have been there. So it's a lot easier for me to think and have this podcast where I'm like, okay, I can hear these women's struggles. And then now I'm, experiencing it, but now I can lean on this person. And then hopefully, like, the whole reason of the podcast is that younger girls can learn from these experiences, and I can be that person for them, 100%. So it is like
building a bigger table.
Right. Well, this was so much fun. I loved it. Thank you so much for coming on. This really was fun. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Before we stop, I just want to give you a huge shout out. There are a lot of young people in the world, and you're super motivated and kind and passionate and driven and doing things like this. And anyone who listens and any young girl should know that anything is possible. And you're
really
setting such a great example.
Thank you.
It's really an honor and
so
a treasure
fun.
to sit here.
It's so fun
far away from each other on this giant couch.
It's comfortable though. I like it. I have to tell the Ravens.
So thank you for doing what you do.
Of course. Thank you so much. That means a lot. Thank you, everyone. Bye.